America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Jordan Bruneau, Vice President of Job Creators Network. Today we're delighted to be joined by Wynton Hall. Wynton is the author of the brand new book, Code Red, The Left, the Right, China, and the Race to Control AI. He's here to break down why the AI race, especially between US and China, could determine the fate of American businesses and our freedoms. Wynton, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Wynton, tell us about your new book and tell us the major arguments in it.
Yeah, so I spent the last 2 years doing a deep dive into the world of artificial intelligence, and I wanted to tell not just a story about a tool, but really about political power. As somebody who's been active all his life in writing and storytelling, I thought that people often say AI is just a tool. It is a tool, but it is far more than that. And it's going to be political power that's going to increasingly reorient all of the different policy dimensions that left and right have argued over for many years. And so I wanted to do that through the lens of things like education, through things like job creation, which I know is important to you, China as it relates to national security, threat vectors like non-state actors and terrorism and AI, and even down to the human relationships with what we see in the AI companions and AI girlfriends and so forth. So I did that, and basically reason why I called it Code Red was it's a double meaning. One is an alert or an alarm, but also a code. We need a set of principles to guide people, particularly right of center people. This was really written for conservative free market, libertarian-minded individuals, of how Silicon Valley elites who often do not share a right-leaning perspective, even though there are some very courageous right-leaning people in Silicon Valley, will be facing a whole new different policy matrix. And I really want to make sure that I showed a lot of the upside, because this is not a doomer book by any stretch. I think there's going to be a huge amount of opportunity, particularly actually for entrepreneurs in AI, but there are going to be a whole new set of landmines that we got to navigate.
Absolutely. Well, I almost was thinking maybe a triple entendre when you consider the red being China. So give us a little discussion about maybe what you see as the race between the US and China on AI, and then just maybe I would love your thoughts on AI more generally, because we hear so much doom and gloom from some sides. So I just love that expert take as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. Yeah, so we often hear we've got to win the AI race with China. That is absolutely true. I think President Trump is doing an amazing job leading in that. And I think what I'm actually encouraged by is there's increasingly a bipartisan understanding of why we have to win in this AI race. So let me kind of break it down the way I do in Code Red. There's really two core pillars in this. One is the economic side, right? We know that whoever wins that AI race is going to have an enormous economic boon, and we've already seen that. 1/3 of the S&P 500 right now is made up of that tent pole of the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven, America's 7 big tech companies, the usual suspects, Google, Alphabet, Meta, and so forth. And they really are a huge economic pillar. The other side of that coin is what happened when DeepSeek, China's AI model R1, was dropped. It was the biggest one-day single market market cap loss in American history of a single company when NVIDIA got rocked by DeepSeek for $600 billion wipeout that day. So tug of war on economics between China and America. We obviously want to win that. But the second reason that we don't want to live in a world built on Chinese AI rails, and probably the more important one because it involves life and death, is the national security side of this, right? And so here are the reasons why. Number one is that whoever gains ultimate dominance in the AI race is going to have full spectrum dominance on the battlefield in things like encryption, cybersecurity, hacking of missile systems, hacking even of infrastructure of our cities and states, and indeed the whole country. And so The reason for that is because of something called RSI, which is a theoretical point. It's not been achieved yet, but many scholars believe it's in the nearing here. And RSI stands for recursive self-improvement. This is the point at which the AI will be able to autonomously correct and update its own code and create this exponential growth curve. Whoever gets to RSI first has massive advantage in the national security space. And what I say in the book is we want to beat China without becoming China. We do not want to live in a techno-authoritarian surveillance communist state. None of us do. We all cherish our freedoms and our liberties under the Constitution. But we can beat China without becoming China by really looking at choke points, economic choke points like the export chip debate as it relates to high advanced chips and semiconductors that power so much of AI advancement as it relates to graphics processing units. And also by getting rid of the what I call data vacuums or Trojan horses, which was what we saw with DeepSeek. These are models that are basically surveillance apps for the CCP. And we really have, thankfully, under President Trump, we're cracking down on having federal workers not allowed to use them, state workers, and so forth. Now, on the entrepreneurial piece, which is really where I think there's a lot of upside and hope, and in Code Red, I really do try to show you both of those sides, and I give you real specific things at the end of each chapter for you to apply for yourself and also in a political context. Never in history, Jordan, have young entrepreneurs or any entrepreneurs had the kind of scale capacity that AI is going to give you for pennies on the dollar. You're talking about with agentic AI, which is text to action, which is think of it like a digital employee that autonomously does the work. That is going to give startups and bootstrapping entrepreneurs massive, massive leverage and ability to scale. And I think that's great because I say in Code Red that the future is not teaching our kids how to apply for jobs, but how to create them. And that's why actually I love what Job Creators Network stands for. I've known and worked with Alfredo, you, the whole team for years and years. And I know what Bernie's vision was from the very start, which was how do we empower the little person who has a big dream and maybe they don't have a lot of cash, but they really have that fire in the belly, that grit and that resilience to really build something, create jobs and opportunity for themselves, their family, and their communities. And I really do think you're going to have a superpowered ability with that. At the same time, I think you're going to have a lot of real pressure coming down as it relates to white-collar job replacement. And we've heard a lot of those arguments, as you indicated.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that's definitely my take. When I talk to small businesses on a day-to-day basis, they're telling me I'm using these tools to expand, to grow things that they could never afford before. So that definitely is one side of it. But then I do talk to that huge cohort, which you alluded to, who is afraid of the job loss, the white-collar small businesses. I'd love to get your take on, I have a small story here. When I did a year of finance about a decade ago, and I talked to a gentleman there who worked at the time when spreadsheets were still made with scissors and glue. They would make spreadsheets. And he said, when Microsoft Excel came in, late 80s, I think, early 90s, everybody was afraid. All the finance guys were afraid that this would, jobs. Obviously, as we saw, the exact opposite happen. It allowed bankers and finance professionals and everyone to become so much more productive, and finance has just continued its rise into the stratosphere. Is AI on an entirely different plane than something like that we've seen before, or is the underlying argument similar?
Yeah, Jordan, this is so important. So, a lot of free market conservatives, of which I am chief among them, I'm a proud capitalist and free market person. We often default to the obvious arguments, which is, look, the Industrial Revolution, it was a massive disruption, but, technology destroys jobs, but it creates way more jobs, so out with the candle, in with the light bulb, out with the buggy whip, in with the car. This is just part of creative destruction and just part of free market capitalism. And then also this argument, which is basically Jevons paradox, which is this idea that, once you create lower costs on things, it actually creates more job expansion and more prosperity. Now, that's the classic argument and the one that we often default to. And so we say, look, I've heard this for all my life. The robots are coming to get our jobs. It never happens. The calculator, the spreadsheet, the internet, all it does is create a bigger pie for all of us in free market. where the AI architects, and these are very brilliant people, whatever you think of their argument, they are some of the richest, most successful people on the planet. Here's where they say this time is very different. They say, yes, it is true. Never in history has a technology destroyed more jobs, ultimately long-term, than it creates net, right? But here's why they say it's different. They say that those were jobs that were largely affecting blue-collar or automation work or moving of atoms, shifting and shaping of atoms in the universe, a factory, assembly line, agrarian adoption from a mule and a plow to a mechanized agriculture equipment. What they say is different this time is that we're now scaling cognition. And so, yes, new jobs will be created, but those jobs will be able to be done by AI agents. And so what people have to understand is agentic AI is the linchpin that will determine who's right on this debate. What is agentic AI? It is text to action. So, and this is not a theoretical thing. This is already here and is not nascent even. It's actually matured quite a bit. Claude Cowork for Anthropic, OpenClaw, right now recently acquired by OpenAI. What is it? So let's imagine, Jordan, you and I want to create a protein shake company for workouts, okay? And we're just new entrepreneurs. The AI agent, we would give it the task, and here's what it would do. It would take over our cursor. It would move autonomously on our computer and do the following. It would register an LLC, register a brand mark, open up a banking business account, go ahead and create a Swipe account, go ahead and create a Shopify account, build the logo, build the website, make the supply chain, do the drop shipping, all of that 24/7, a digital employee that never complains, never asks for a raise, doesn't have a retirement plan, and doesn't require any kind of HR management, okay? So that's where we are now. Now, a lot of people say, look, there's still hallucinations, it makes errors, you still got to have a human in the loop, you still got to have human override. Absolutely true. But again, we're at a very nascent state in that. And the question is, what are we on? iPhone 17? Does anybody remember what iPhone 1 was? It was like a dinosaur, right? So yeah, it totally was. And this technology is shattering Moore's law, which says that computing capacities double roughly 18 to 24 months. So you're already seeing a speed efficiency that is unlike anything we've ever seen. Now, what are these experts saying? Well, again, this is why I wrote Code Red, to just quote them. It's old school journalism. Let you decide how this plays out. Let's take them from the top. Dario Amodei at Anthropic, again, one of the largest frontier enterprise LLMs, large language models. He says, Jordan, in the next 12 months, not 12 years, 12 months from 2 months ago, we're looking at a wipeout of 50% of white-collar entry-level job replacement, okay? Now, if you're a parent or somebody just cares about the next generation, that's our college kids, right? First, you remember your first job as a young professional. I remember you had great mentors. I had great mentors. We need that professional development to help us get all those first couple rungs because we're new. We don't know. We don't know what we're doing. So when you hack away those first two rungs off that entry-level white-collar job, think about how that has a hollowing out effect when you get to middle management and senior management 5-10 years out. But more importantly, for those young people, what's that going to look like? Now, the second person that you need to be paying attention to is from a little company you may have heard of called Microsoft, one of the richest companies that ever existed. And Microsoft AI's CEO is Mustafa Suleyman, one of the pioneers of AI. And he says, Jordan, that in the next 12 to 18 months, you're not just looking at the entry level. He says you're looking at 100% of the white-collar tasks able to be automated. Now, to be clear, to be accurate, he's not saying you're going to see all 100% of jobs go away in 12 months. What he's saying is you'll have the ability. Now, how fast do corporations infuse agentic AI? How fast do they invest in building out agentic workflows to replace those layers? We're going to find out and we're going to see. But this is moving at such a warp speed. I felt like I had to help people get up to speed very quickly. That's why I wrote Code Red.
Excellent. Thank you. My last question then would just be, what are some of the main takeaways or arguments or call to actions that you include in the book for readers?
Yeah, number one, I would say is to understand this is not just a tool. It is a tool, but it's also power. And so you've got to know how that power can affect your child's education, how it can affect your job, how it can affect national security. You have to understand that. And this book has 80 pages of endnotes, 800 endnotes. It's exhaustively researched. And so I try to make it simple without being simplistic. You don't need any kind of advanced degree in tech. What I really want to do is tell a power story. Number two, Jensen Huang at NVIDIA, one of the richest companies that's ever existed on planet Earth, he has a phrase and he says, you won't be replaced by AI, but you will, and your job will be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. And what he's saying is that early adopters will have a bigger moat, right? They will have a little bit more protection. Doesn't mean you're going to have full protection. You still got to be able to perform and outcompete your fellow colleagues and so forth who may be vying for those jobs. But that is going to be true at least for a period. The third thing I would say is having some humility when you're approaching this. It's so natural, and I really empathize with this. I've been a writer my whole life as a celebrity ghostwriter, and you like to think, well, this will affect other people, but not my industry, right? Not me, or I'm somehow special, or my level of expertise. What I would say is this: if you feel that way because you've used something like ChatGPT and you found it to be erroneous, please understand three things. One, ChatGPT is cotton candy in AI. That is not real. That is not the real strong AI, the business to business application, the agentic layers. Number two, if you are of that mind, I would really invite you to make sure, just to bulletproof yourself, that you know in your industry and your expertise, what is the current state of play in agentic AI as it relates to model context protocol, retrieval augmented generation. And if those terms aren't familiar to you, that may mean that you might want to get a little more coached up because you may not be looking down deep enough of how this is going to play out. And then the final thing I would say on that is really thinking about your kids. I tell people the future of jobs is, like I said, not learning how to apply for jobs, but how to create them. What I mean by that is teaching our children an entrepreneurial layer. That's why I think, Job Creators Network and what you guys do, being evangelists for people at all walks of life, no matter if they've got a big, huge dream or a little dream, and really particularly those small businesses who need support and need that fellowship and help and counsel to be able to grow themselves. I think that is such a beautiful vision, because I think what it does is it gives us stronger communities, people that are able to create and sustain those jobs. And I think handing that down to this younger generation who's going to have AI powering them is a very important piece to this. So I think you just really want to make sure is that you don't just default to, oh, AI, it's all hype and marketing. I used it one time and I got an error. You really want to make sure that you're approaching it with clear eyes, because this is very real. You're talking about $5 trillion, that's a T, trillion dollars in global investment over the next 2 years. If you want to know where the puck is going, you got to look where the money is flowing, and it is flowing fast. These are people that are very smart and very wealthy, and it's not because they're stupid. It's because they have seen behind closed doors what the next version of each of these iterations are going to look like. And so just because we're on version 8, let's say metaphorically, they're in version 25 behind the laboratory.
Right. Okay. Well, Wynton, thank you so much for joining us today on Main Street Matters. The book is Code Red: The Left, the Right, China, and the Race to Control AI. I encourage every listener to pick up a copy to educate themselves on this revolution that is coming and just seems to be picking up speed. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can find the audio version anywhere you get your podcast, and you can watch the show on the Job Creators Network channels on YouTube and Rumble. Thanks, and we'll be back soon with another episode.